This year at EQUIP, we'll be looking at the book of Jonah. We often think of Jonah as a children's story, but it's actually a sophisticated piece of literature. I'm with Di Warren with a guide to reading the book of Jonah. So Di, let's start with the setting of Jonah. Where's it set?
Well, Jonah is set at a very interesting time in the history of northern Israel. We know it's set somewhere between 786 BC and 746 BC because that's the reign, basically, of the king concurrent with Jonah's ministry. We know that from 2 Kings 14, where it mentions this king, Jeroboam. He became the king in Samaria, or northern Israel, and he reigned for 41 years. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord, and he did not turn away from any of the sins of the previous king Jeroboam, which he had caused Israel to commit. Now, this king was the one who restored the boundaries of Israel in accordance with the word of the Lord, the God of Israel, spoken through his servant Jonah. So we can date it pretty accurately of that king. But more interesting than that is the date 722 BC, because 722 is when that northern kingdom of Israel is destroyed by the nation Assyria, which is the very people that Jonah is being sent to, Nineveh.
Nineveh is one of the great cities of Assyria at that time.
Yes. So that's the sort of the time setting. In terms of the geography, we're looking at the Mediterranean Sea, and we're looking there at around Israel. And then northeast of Israel is Nineveh and Assyria. And then the boat goes out probably towards Spain on its journey.
So Tarshish is sort of in that
over
area
that way,
we'd know as Spain. Yeah. So what's the structure of the book?
Well, the book basically divides into part 1 and part 2. So Jonah 1 and 2, and then Jonah 3 and 4. But then there's this interesting sort of pairing of the content. So Jonah 1 and Jonah 3 are the call of God to Jonah to go to Nineveh. And of course, he doesn't go the first time. And so Jonah chapter 3 is take 2. And then Jonah 2 and 4 is when we get a bit of a window into what Jonah is thinking and feeling.
Do we have any idea who wrote the book of Jonah?
No. I mean, it begins the word of the Lord that came to Jonah. So maybe Jonah later penciled it down, but it's not clear who the author is.
So Jonah's a story, and so characters are the things that we think about in stories. What about the characters in Jonah?
It's quite interesting. Only 2 characters are actually named in the book. All the rest are anonymous. So the named ones are God by his personal name Yahweh, or the Lord, and Jonah. Now, it's really important. God is the main character and his personal name Yahweh, which is why really Jonah can be seen as a deep reflection on Exodus 34. You see, back in Exodus 34, God reveals his name to Moses. And when he reveals his personal name, it's in terms of his character. And so he says, the Lord, the compassionate and gracious God, slow to anger, abounding in love and faithfulness, maintaining love to thousands and forgiving wickedness, rebellion and sin. And yet he does not leave the guilty unpunished. And really Jonah is all about a struggle. How do we understand that beautiful character of God reflected in human history? So God's the main character and, of course, named. And then Jonah is named, and he's this interesting prophet who doesn't want to be a prophet. Now, the anonymous ones, there's really the Gentile nations. We've got the pagan sailors in chapter 1, and then the whole city of Nineveh in chapter 3. And then the other anonymous characters are the animals. So we've got the big fish, chapter 1 and chapter 2.
The famous fish.
We've got all the animals listed, the herd and the animals in Nineveh, the city of Nineveh. And then chapter 4, we've got the worm.
They're quite strong characters in terms of the story of Jonah, even though they're anonymous, aren't they?
Yes.
I feel like they sometimes act as foils to the named character of Jonah.
Like contrasts. Sometimes the people who you think would be doing a certain thing, someone else does that very thing.
Yeah. So Jonah's an Old Testament book. Do we see Jonah in the New Testament?
Yeah, we see the sign of Jonah in Matthew 12 and Luke 11. And there in Matthew 12 is interesting. 2 different references are made to Jonah. The first is the idea of 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the fish, Jonah, compared to 3 days and 3 nights in the earth, Jesus. And there's an interesting comparison also because it mentions the men of Nineveh who will rise up and judge Jesus' generation because Jesus is the greater prophet than Jonah.
Are there other allusions?
Things like the parables, the vineyard workers who get quite grumbly at the end of that parable, and the older brother in the lost son parable, both of them struggle with the idea of mercy. And then there's that interesting story of Jesus in the boat, asleep. But of course, that's a contrast to Jonah because Jesus comes up and he's not thrown overboard, rather he calms the storm.
So Jonah being a story, we often have quite strong reactions to stories.
Yeah.
What is the impact of reading Jonah?
I've been reading it recently with a lot of women, and I think there's 3 reactions we all have. The first is to laugh because it's funny. Like,
it's very
the
comedic.
way it's told, there's this irony. And I think the reason we laugh is because you can't run away from God. Like if you try to, it's just a mess. So we laugh really at all the twists and turns of what God's doing. Then that turns to us squirming, I think, because as we dive in and think on what Jonah's feeling and thinking, we realise we're quite similar. And so you have this sense of a little window into your own hard heart. And then that leaves us to marvel at God's mercy because, even though we are so undeserving, God's character is to keep showing mercy to all the nations. And so that's where Jonah leaves us.
Thanks, Di. I hope that whets your appetite for the book of Jonah. We're really looking forward to seeing you at EQUIP26, Undeserving, the Mystery of Mercy.